Cool. Jarf, you have
Sure.
the demo item.
I'll start. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot to demo. So the good news is that we have the sidekiq configuration done. We have the sidekiq secret configuration done. The bad news is that we're blocked on an issue that prevents us from running project export in the staging Kubernetes cluster. I can give you a quick look at the configuration. There isn't much to see here just because we already have this configuration for production, but what is clear is that there's a lot of config that's duplicated between Chef and the Kubernetes cluster. For example, the Gitaly config and all of the shards, and this is going to be even more complicated for production. This is just for staging, where we have a single file node for all of the shards that were used at the time that we did the database import. We need to figure this out. I mean, we really need a way to unify the Chef and Kubernetes configuration if we're going to have our foot in both worlds for, I imagine, months.
John, you know what I'm going to say, right?
JSONet?
Distributed tracing or JSONet.
Oh, distributed.
Right? One of the two.
Yeah,
no, obviously JSONet would do this really well, right?
Yeah, that's an option, and the thing is and I guess what you're thinking is that we have a JSONet source for generating the Chef roles.
Yeah,
configuration
like
on disk
source.
as well as the YAML.
Yeah, and obviously if you need to have one extra step of changing the JSON to YAML, because they're functionally the same, or just leave it as JSON. But
yeah,
you kind of have a kind of source of truth, and that gets transformed into both.
Yeah,
it's an idea. It might be, I know I'm that's the drum I beat all day long, but it does work pretty well.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is. Another option would be to have a template that sources the data directly from Chef. So we would put the data in role attributes first that would get uploaded to Chef, and then we would have a pipeline that generates the Kubernetes configuration from Chef, or as much as we need to, and then we would inspect it and then apply it.
Yeah, it's
the same issue applies to our secrets as well. I mean, this is a large problem that we're going to run into. I linked the issue that we created for this inside of our document.
Yeah, secrets is even a bigger mess, but it's also sort of a mess for Chef, because the way that we handle secrets is that we have JSON files that are stored in object storage that are encrypted with GKMS. You basically, if you have to update a secret, you decrypt, update the JSON file, re-upload it to object storage, and encrypt it again. And we have a helper script for that. I mean, we could probably just have yet another pipeline that pulls down the secrets from object storage, decrypts them, and then syncs them with Kubernetes secrets. This is a solved problem. It's just that it seems like we've been talking about going to Vault for as long as I've been working here.
That's what I wanted to ask now. Aren't we working on that?
Yeah, I mean, you could have made that statement 2 years ago, and I would have said, yeah, we are.
So how are we handling this? Do you run a kubectl manually to update the secrets from the thing? Okay.
Yeah, and that's really not good. I mean, you can have all sorts of manual errors. I mean, we need to automate it somehow. If that's the approach we're going to take, then we need to automate it somehow in the pipeline. I'm just not sure, Maren. I mean, I think Vault is being worked on again, but I don't have a horizon to give you on when that work's going to be complete to integrate Vault with Chef. I think once we integrate Vault with Chef, then that opens some doors to make this a bit better.
Jesus Christ! I'm just looking now at the epics. I found the Vault epic, and it has been on and off for years. And the latest update is like a week ago. Hey, we are restarting this effort by designing things. So we didn't even start. this is just in like the conception phases.
Joe,
So,
is there like a, sorry, Maren, go ahead.
I wanted to ask the only one quick thing, and that is, if I need to go and press some, let's say feet, to get this thing higher on the priority list, how much would it simplify our work here? Do we have to shift the focus a tiny bit and say that Kubernetes migration is being delayed because we are missing crucial components so that I can rally some support? Or do we have a quick fix yet again to continue like chugging along with our migration while this is happening in the background? Like that is the only thing I cannot decide at the moment. You're more familiar with state of affairs.
Generally, secrets are fairly stable, and there aren't as many secrets for just sidekiq. Like we don't have to worry about all of the certificates and everything like that. But there are certainly a bunch of them. Like we have Gitterly encryption, we have database credentials, Redis credentials. We're already using Kubernetes secrets for Redis credential for mailroom, for example, and for registry certificate. But I don't know how I would feel. I don't know how you would feel, Scarbeck, but yeah, I don't know how I would feel about using just regular Kubernetes secrets manually entered for going into production.
That is, Scarbeck, without even giving you a chance to answer, that is frightening. I was okay with that with registry, but I'm not okay with that for sidekiq.
So alternatively,
Scarbeck,
I think,
sorry, feel free to answer now.
Can I ask, like, is there something we could leverage with like Google tools that are not vaults, but like Google secrets, whatever it's called?
GKM,
they've got
VS or whatever.
Like, could they do the secrets in Kubernetes for us, and we just keep that? Like, I know I'm coming in here with like very little knowledge.
Good question.
The problem is that we want to maintain a single source of truth for secrets between Chef and the cluster. That's the crux of the issue. I think in general secrets management, it's more like a single source of truth. So whatever system we change to, we need to change on both sides.
Could
we
Chef
use a
get
system,
secrets from k8s?
Yeah, so Chef currently, what it does is, right, it has JSON files that are in object storage encrypted with GKMS. It's a very simple design, but it works okay. We could obviously like just source the secrets from those JSON files in a pipeline, decrypt them with JKMS, just like Chef does, and we would have a single source of truth. This whole setup, though, was always supposed to be a temporary thing until we have Vault. That's where we are.
Okay, but that gives us a path forward then, though, because the temporary thing is going to be a permanent thing for the next year, as I'm seeing it right now. So if that unlocks us from like continuing our progress, like let's do that, let's do a tiny sidestep. And if Vault happens, then it's not going to be a big deal for us to just adapt to that, right?
Yeah, I think that's what I was thinking, is that we continue with the temporary solution. At least we have a single source of truth for secrets, and maybe we can improve it incrementally as well. We're going to spend a little bit of time on it.
We also still have a lot of time before we get auto deploy working with Kubernetes. So like we have time.
And the time is the only thing we don't have. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, but we still have other things that are blocking us from reaching production today.
Yeah.
So I think we could probably continue. We could work on the secrets and configuration in parallel with us trying to get auto deploy working. Because I don't want to go to production if we don't have auto deploy working at all, because that's worse than
it's a recipe for disaster. Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster.
But on that same token, I've got a very controversial opinion on this overall. I don't even like this opinion, but I think we should allow us to go to production without a single source of truth, just to enforce the fact that when we do accidentally create an outage because we didn't update something, this pushes that need for that corrective action higher on the priority list.
I don't know about that. I mean, you mean like use the postmortem to like prioritize issues? I don't think this is a good.
I mean, I don't like the idea.
Can we stop the recording? Can we stop the recording?
We can't stop the recording. I don't want to stop the recording.
No, I'm kidding.
Skybrek, I get your point, but outage-driven development is not something on our roadmap. It is only used to source teams that way. That's how we are all here. Anyway, no, let's please not do that.
Okay, so just moving on then, there were some, in the last, I guess, since the last time we talked, or the last demo, we found some charts issue. Database configuration still needs to be like fleshed out a bit on charts. We don't have any load balancing, and there are some other settings that we need to tweak, but I think what we have now is good enough for staging. And then I think we did come across the issue that we have different database endpoints for sidekiq in the front end. Sidekiq connects to the sidekiq PG bouncer, and the front end connects to the main PG bouncer. In charts, there's only the option for one database endpoint for Postgres. So we're going to need to configure that. I think it's going to be simple in charts. We'll probably just have an override for like, this is the sidekiq database, and this is the sidekiq database name. This is the endpoint and this is the name, and if that's not defined, then it'll maybe fall back to the global one. So we just need to resolve that.
I think the same issue applies for the Redis endpoints as well.
Really?
Because we got Redis cache and we got Redis
it doesn't,
something
we don't support
and Redis
Redis
sidekiq.
I thought we,
but
okay,
we have, don't we have Redis HA in the charts itself? So theoretically that should allow things?
They might assume only one Redis endpoint. I don't know. I haven't looked.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, maybe we'll have the same thing there. And yeah, that's about it.
We are only using one Redis instance. Like we split those up, but they're not really split up. They just point to the same thing, don't they?
Do they?
In production or
production?
What do you mean?
That's what I'm asking.
Oh, no, there's two Redis clusters. One, there's Redis and Redis
three.
cache. Well, three.
And Redis sidekiq.
And Redis sidekiq, yeah.
But sorry, I was digging through one of the issues that I was looking at, and I got a little bit distracted. But like Redis, in my imagination, would probably be one of the last things that we move across, right?
No, we're not talking about moving Redis, Andrew. We're talking about configuring the endpoints for multiple Redis clusters. That's all.
Okay. Oh, right. Yeah, I get it. Okay. Sorry, just.
Okay, that's about it for me. Skybrek, did you want to add anything?
I don't have anything to add for demo or to show off anything. So I think maybe, do we want to talk about next week's goals?
I want to ask, Jarv, you've been testing the, as far as I know, you've been testing the builds in CNG, in the images repository. Yes. Tell me a bit about that. Like, how is that?
Oh, it's really awkward right now. What I did was I created, and I'll share my screen again.
Yes, thanks. Just while you're searching for that, bit of background for folks who are joining here first time. In order for us to be able to have the same process for what we do in production and together with charts right now, we need to be able to pass arbitrary SHAs and build images out of arbitrary SHAs, similar how we do Omnibus at the moment. Because the things that are currently running in production on Kubernetes, registry and mailroom, have slow moving versions, which means it is not really that difficult for us to go and commit a change of a version number that's gonna get rolled out across clusters. We can't do that easily with sidekiq, which is tightly tied, obviously, to the Rails project. Not even tightly, it's the Rails project, basically. So in order for us to be able to, basically do what Jarvis is now going to explain, we need to, at the same time when we are building the Omnibus package out of those specific SHAs, also build the images that we're going to be reused in the charts going further.
Sure. So what we had to do is I created an auto deploy branch. I updated the component versions. Then I tagged it. I had to make some small changes to prevent. I only wanted the CE jobs to run. I'm sorry. I only want the EE jobs to run since that's all I care about. So I had to change the CI configuration to say, like, for an auto deploy, all we care about is EE, and that was pretty much it. We had one problem. We ran into one bug where assets weren't compiling. What I did for now is so for auto deploy, we have this thing in the CI config where we have a check in the CI config. If it's an auto deploy tag, we compile assets. And we did this for Omnibus, and that was carried forward over to CMG. The reason we did this was so that we didn't wait for assets to be uploaded to registry before doing the auto deploy. I'm trying to remember if there were more reasons besides that. But
we also upload to the S3 bucket where we can reuse the assets, right? So it's not only that we don't wait for it, it's also that there are no dependencies between the Rails pipeline and Omnibus pipeline where we can just rebuild this really quickly. Yeah, so
anyway, because of the problem of compiling assets, I just used the asset image instead. So I commented out on this branch that I was testing on, I commented out logic that says, if this is an auto deploy tag, then compile assets. Instead, it just pulled down the image from the registry, which is fine because auto deploy uses a green commit right now, so the image exists. So that's fine. And then at the end of it, if I click on here, oops, not here. I want the sidekiq. Here. Here is the tag that ends up being created. The terrible thing here is that we have yet another auto deploy format for the tag. So, and this won't make sense for Andrew and Bob, but for Skarbek and Marin, you can see that, like, you know, now we have an additional format where it's 12-7 instead of 12.7. And yeah, so we have, this is like the third generation of,
this is,
you know,
absolutely horrendous.
Yeah. It's because it needs to be host name, valid for a host name, I guess. Like, you can't have dots in it. I don't know exactly where this logic is. I need to look into it, but maybe it's valid as a registry tag. You can have dots in a registry tag, but I think somewhere else there is some, like, changing dots into dashes. But this is what you end up with. This is the so this tag is what I use to deploy sidekiq for staging. Like, I use this tag of the sidekiq image.
Serves us right for being hybrid. So you need to satisfy apt requirements and DBM packaging requirements created 30 years ago, if not 40, and then new requirements built in the past 15 years, and then the newest thing that was built 5 years ago. So we have this awesome system.
Yeah, and we can't standardize on this, on dashes, because it would break Semver for the package. You know, we need to have at least major dot minor dot something, I think. So or maybe we don't. I honestly, I don't know. Like maybe we could just standardize on using just dashes and it would be fine. We would have to see how that would be treated by apt when we do an apt get upgrade.
All right. Well, dashes won't work. I'll tell you that much. There is like
I don't think it will.
special significance for dashes as well
Yeah.
in apt. Okay, this is a side problem that I don't want to deal with. Honestly, like if it's dashes, then I'll survive with dashes in dots.
Yeah.
Who cares? Well, I care, but it doesn't matter. Okay, cool.
Cool.
Oh, thanks for the update. Sorry that it's this painful, but this is the world we live in. I just want to, because we have scalability also here as well. Skarbek, would you mind like going, putting you on the spot here, but maybe just explain like in short the challenges we've seen by selecting this project export queue while we were developing, while we were trying to put it in staging rather. Maybe just kind of run us through from the application side what you saw as issues. Putting you on the spot here. If you can, you can.
What I saw as issues?
Yeah, as problems.
I don't know. I feel like things have been going pretty well with at least the pre-environment. We got it running pretty quickly. It was just validation that things were working as desired. Some of the configurations we had to work through, but we got through it. Obviously, Jar found some new stuff with staging. We found one of the challenges that we are going to probably face is the scaling of things. Currently, we are copying the configuration to match that of our VM. So we're going to have 16 pods to match our 16 total worker counts with a concurrency level of 1. The instance sizes are slightly different, but the max memory usage per worker puts us in line with an individual node. So right now we've got node sizes that are 51 gigabytes of RAM, but they run 4 workers, whereas our nodes inside of GKE have, if I recall correctly, 13 or so gigabytes of RAM, something relatively low, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But with the max memory, Kubernetes is setting the max memory for the request, or the limit, excuse me, of the pod to 16 gigabytes. I don't know if that's going to cause an issue because I haven't been able to find an export that uses that large amount of RAM. Only 2 gigabytes is the largest I've seen so far.
How many cores are each of the pods going to get?
Say that one more time.
How many cores are the pods going? Because from what I've seen, like memory isn't a massive thing with like a lot of the clusters.
I mean, I don't know how to answer your question.
Okay.
What's the request for CPU request for the pods?
Oh, the CPU request is set to something relatively low. It's like 50 millicores. There's no limit. The limit is 2 full CPUs. And we scale if we reach a configure, or if we reach a metric that exceeds 350 millicores. So as soon as we pick up work, we'll scale up a pod.
And is there a maximum number of pods?
16.
16, so we won't go beyond.
Correct.
16 pods ever. Okay.
And how many sidekiq? So are we using sidekiq cluster or no sidekiq cluster?
I don't know how the image is configured.
Naren, do you know the answer?
I think we're using sidekiq, I believe. I need to double check. I forgot.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago.
Okay. Because the other thing is that I forgot what I was going to say. No. Yeah, we just need to make sure that we don't have more than, like the number of processes should match the number of cores that we've got. Because that was one of the big mistakes we had before. We were trying to do clever things and it just...
I've tried to
led
match
to more
configuration between the VMs.
We're using sidekiq, right? Because we have
Sidekiq.
a concurrency of one.
I
It's
just
like,
found it.
yeah, and it's just,
Okay.
it's one worker per pod.
Okay.
I'm trying to paste in the demo doc.
So we do have a load testing issue open. I opened up a load testing issue this week. I think the most important thing for me is going to be, we need to create some larger projects, do some exports, and try to see where things fall over on I/O. Because my biggest concern is like we have a lot of exports in the queue and we're getting hammered on I/O for the small number of nodes we have.
The other thing, like the one thing about background processing jobs is that they're really easy to scale and on basically queue length, right? Like that's the beauty of background processing is you know how much work you need to get done because you've got a queue. And so that's generally like a much better metric than CPU or memory, like, because if you have lots of jobs that are waiting to get run, you scale up more workers.
The distribution team has an open issue to look at that style of metric to determine scale.
Frankly, I think that should be owned by us or infrastructure in general, like not, you know, we can feed that back to them, but, you know, we have way more data and, you know, that's what, you know, we've been looking at that stuff for a lot longer.
I mean, you're talking about who should be driving. We should be driving rather than them. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, we should be the ones, but because effectively you need a PromQL query for that, right? And that would be something, you know, we've got the experience of sidekiq, we've got the experience of PromQL, we've got the, obviously everything is running on GitLab.com that we can model, use to model. So it makes more sense for us to do that than them, I think.
But for project export, I think it might be bad just to scale out the number of pods if you have.
Obviously, there's a max, right?
Yeah. I've got to run to next meeting, so I'll see you guys.
Bye, Jarv. Have a good weekend.
Cool. Another thing worth mentioning here is, sorry, before I continue, Andrew, did you see, like I linked the fact that we are using sidekiq. I linked it in the doc. Just FYI there. If we need to change anything there, we should be talking about that a bit more.
Yeah, and actually, we should talk about it because effectively what we're saying is that the language that we were talking about in the last meeting, you know, the selector language, will need to be applied to kind of create the Kubernetes deployment rather than to configure inside a pod. It's configuring the pods. I don't know if I've got the right parlance and stuff, but are you following what I'm saying, Skarbek? No. Okay, so Skarbek, okay, so what I'm saying is previously in my mind, sidekiq would kind of boot up, or sidekiq cluster would boot up inside a pod. It would read the language that would say, I'm going to take latency sensitive CPU bound jobs and run them in my sidekiq little pod, and then it would run them. But actually now what we're saying is that when we configure Kubernetes, we almost give that config to Kubernetes, and then Kubernetes will basically use that to kind of generate a config that starts sidekiq with the queues expressed by that expression. So we kind of need to expand it before, you know, because sidekiq doesn't know how to expand those queues, the expression into the queues. So either we need to put that into sidekiq, or we need to get sidekiq cluster inside the pod, or we need to make Kubernetes deal with the expression
This
language.
might be an interesting use case where we use the Kubernetes operator that could build an appropriate sidekiq configuration potentially.
But that is too far up, I would say, because sidekiq cluster should be the one handling that stuff anyway. So given that we are talking about moving sidekiq cluster to core and making that the default, we might as well start with sidekiq cluster now, given that we have like these different alleys.
there seems to be sort of a general thing being driven by the memory team that everything will run sidekiq cluster.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we have memory team is driving. They just got the approval the other day to move sidekiq cluster to core. So they're moving that probably very soon. From our side, from scalability, we have the changes on how we are actually creating the queues. And then from the delivery side, we should be changing the ways that the charts are consuming whatever we decided. And in this case, we decided sidekiq cluster. So we should definitely start investigating to see what kind of changes do we need to make to start using sidekiq cluster in charts, because it's going to affect us very soon in any case.
I mean, the other option is that if you start sidekiq cluster with, this is kind of going into the weeds a bit, but like I have this kind of thing about like having a process manager inside a Kubernetes pod that's running like a single process underneath it. But maybe we could get it that it just, no, it's fine. We just keep running it with one. It's fine. It's a little bit of extra overhead, but who cares? And then, yeah, we run sidekiq cluster everywhere, and inside the pod, it will take the YAML file that Sean was talking about in the last meeting and decide which queues to run. So that's all good.
Cool. Well, I'm already ecstatic that we did these demos back to back. This is time saver, because if we went and built this out further and then this caught us, yeah, in the mid or after we have completed something, just stupidly time wasted.
So
okay.
Is there someone from the distribution team who's going to be doing the site? Like, are they aware of that?
Nope. We are driving changes for sidekiq that now we are putting this in production, or considering putting this in production. We are the ones driving changes in the charts. So Skarbek and Jar have been contributing heavily to charts throughout this period of time. All right. Skarbek, can you just make sure that we have an issue in our queue for delivery to change to sidekiq cluster? You can rewatch this video, and then also give a heads up to distribution so that they know that these type of changes are coming their way, so they're not surprised.
I will do that, yeah.
Thank you. Cool. I had one other thing to talk about, but I just now.
Well, before we continue, you were asking me a question because you were putting me on the spot. Did I answer that question properly? Because we did start a conversation out of it.
You did. You did. You exposed already a couple of things. The other thing I wanted to just highlight is Skarbek did some work on how sidekiq jobs behave inside of Kubernetes when the pods get killed. So that might be very interesting to share in this call as well, if others are interested in hearing it.
I feel like it may be repeat information for those that are familiar with sidekiq, but essentially I did 2 testings where sidekiq was killed in an abrupt manner, sending, was it sig kill, while it was processing a job. And we use sidekiq reliable fetcher to determine that a job got orphaned in some way, shape, or form. So in this particular case, it took roughly 40 minutes, but eventually a new pod picked up work that was abandoned in the queue. The other method was just testing whether sidekiq was processing a job and was killed in a clean manner, so sending a sig term. And in this particular case, sidekiq did exactly what we wanted to do, where it detected that sidekiq was processing a job, it stopped the processing, it threw the work back into the queue, and the next pod that was available picked it up pretty much immediately. So
do we have a graceful shutdown where we let sidekiq shut everything down without starting up new jobs?
We have a graceful timeout. I think it's set to 30 seconds, which is enough time to tell sidekiq to stop the job and re-queue the work, and then the pod will clean itself up.
But there's no option to kind of like let it actually finish the job but not pick up any new ones.
Well, we don't really want it to necessarily finish the job, because if it's a project export that's going to take many, many hours, that will prevent us from performing a deploy. and we don't want that at all. So no is the answer to your question.
Wasn't there a thing that you could do both? Send one signal, wait, send the next one.
Yeah, so the termination will send the SIG term, and if nothing happens with that time period, Kubernetes, I think it's the 30-second window, Kubernetes will automatically send a SIG kill to it. So even if we can't clean up for whatever reason, like the pod is just too overloaded for X reason, we still have the ability using sidekiq reliable fetcher to pluck jobs that were abandoned. That would be detrimental for very important queues where jobs need to happen ASAP, but I think that's a emergency scenario kind of situation.
Yeah, I think we could also make different decisions based on the type of queue we're working on. Like some of the ASAP stuff, they are jobs that should not take minutes to run. They should take seconds. So then, yeah. Other question I had was, you mentioned that if we need to, if we're relying on reliable fetch, how come, like, where does the 40 minutes delay come from before the job gets picked up again?
I don't know. I asked that question and I was pointed to the reliable fetcher documentation, and I didn't follow up myself yet because I just got a little too busy. I figured this stuff out yesterday, so I just haven't been able to figure that out, where that time came from.
Cool, I can look it up myself if you like. Just if you already saw it, I was curious.
40 minutes is a strange amount of time, though. I don't get why it took 40 minutes. Like,
well, the default is 3 months. So I'm glad I didn't need to wait 3 months. But I think that configuration is held within the reliable fetch gem itself. I don't think we have any special configuration inside the GitLab source code. At least inside of the GitLab code, I can't find any special configuration for this at all.
okay.
Cool. All right. Wrapping this up, Skarbek, goals for next week.
I would like to continue trying to work on enabling auto deploy. I've been working on that for the last month at this point. So I would like to try to continue that and try to get that across the finish line. So hopefully, if that all goes well next week, we could auto deploy sidekiq into, say, staging or something to that effect. At least that's what I want. I would like to see us finish the work necessary to get us to staging. So that's a work in progress from Jarv. And Jarv has created a few new issues. Let me pull up our board just so I'm not speaking gibberish. The load testing was something that he recently created. I think that would be a good, wise choice to pull. I don't know if we would have time to complete that. And doing a database configuration audit would be wise. So if anything, I'm going to move the priority or shift the priority. So doing a database configuration audit for sidekiq and staging just to make sure all things are kosher like we need it to be. And then a load test, I think, are two other good items that we could pull.
Didn't we talk about, or do you mean by database configuration? Okay, I need to finish one thought at least, not 5 that are in my head. Having a single source of truth between Chef and Kubernetes being GKMS, is that the database stuff you're mentioning, or should the GKMS stuff be prioritized ahead?
I don't have a preference as to which one is higher priority at this moment in time.
I would consider GKMS to be more higher priority, so that we can wrap that up and then move on to the database stuff. Disagree? Agree? I know you don't have preference, but
I don't have a preference, but I'll pull that into this epic and I'll throw it on the board in the workflow ready column.
From my understanding, with the GKMS stuff, does it mean that there's a lot less work that we need to do on the Kubernetes side, even if there's more on the Chef side?
I think the goal would be to try to figure that out. Currently, it's just a thought process, and it's just a suspicion as to what we want to accomplish. We don't have any, we have not, we haven't triaged it, so we don't know exactly what we want out of it yet. We just know we have a problem to solve.
Yeah, awesome.
Cool. I put that as Jar's next task, so it's easy when people are not in the call. You can just assign things to them. So he has to complete the project export queue adding to staging, so connecting the staging to Kubernetes cluster, and then start the investigation on GKMS source of truth for secrets between Kubernetes.
So just to supplement one of the items I mentioned, this database audit, we've got configuration items inside of our Postgres configuration for Omnibus that we don't have the ability to configure inside of Helm. So this issue is to figure out what the defaults for these options are and to maybe supplement our Helm charts with these configuration options to make those changes if we deem them necessary. That's what that particular issue is about. I kind of consider that higher priority because that requires us to modify Helm charts, but again, I think GKMS stuff will take a lot longer to accomplish because we need to design that and figure out how to implement it too. So we can probably work on this in parallel.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to say. We can work on these three things. So I just put Jar under this, but how about I put Skarbek Jar? So it's up to you to decide who wants to vote. Yeah, coordinate that. Yeah, please add issues to this after this meeting ends. Anyone else have any question or any curiosity, anything? I know that we spent 2 hours together. I think this was probably the best 2 hours I've spent this week. So thank you all very much for participating. And hope to see you next week in these same demos as well.
That was awesome. Have a really good weekend, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.